My parents cut me out of their will. That's how the lawyer phrased it. Cold, sharp, like slicing me out of their lives with a single stroke of a pen. I sat there numb while my siblings smirked across the table, already picturing themselves swimming in the inheritance. They thought I was erased. They thought I was powerless. But they didn't know the secret I carried, the secret that would make the entire family crumble. And what I discovered next changed everything. I grew up in a house that looked like it belonged in a magazine. Marble floors that echoed when you walked, chandeliers dripping with crystals, and gardens trimmed so neatly you'd think the roses knew they were on display. From the outside, we looked perfect, wealthy, refined, untouchable. But on the inside, perfection was just another performance. My parents, Robert and Eleanor, were respected pillars of the community. My father built his empire from nothing. At least that's the story he loved to tell. In truth, he was ruthless, willing to crush anyone who stood in his way. My mother, elegant and sharp-tongued, stood proudly beside him, a queen protecting her throne. To the world, they were admirable. To us, their children, they were impossible. I was the middle child, not the golden firstborn like my brother Michael, and not the cherished youngest like my sister Clara. I was the one in between, the one who worked hard, kept the family secrets, and never shone quite bright enough to be noticed. Michael was the heir apparent, confident, arrogant, always the center of attention. My father treated him like a mirror image, grooming him to take over the family legacy. Clara was the darling. Sweet on the outside, manipulative on the inside, my mother adored her, showering her with affection and gifts. And me? I was dependable, reliable, invisible. Still, I believed loyalty would count for something. I was the one who stayed close, who visited my parents when the others were too busy. I was the one who took my mother to her doctor's appointments, who checked in on the house staff, who remembered birthdays and anniversaries. I told myself that maybe, just maybe, one day they would see me. Not as a shadow child, but as the one who truly cared. For years, I lived with that hope. Our family dinners were the kind of evenings you'd expect to see in an old black and white film: polished silverware, expensive wine, forced smiles. Michael would brag about his latest business deal. Clara would gush about her social circle, dropping names like pearls onto the table. My parents would nod, beam with pride, and when it was my turn to speak, silence followed. My words never carried the same weight, but I kept showing up, because that's what you do when they're your parents. The cracks, though, were always there. Sometimes I'd overhear my siblings talking when they thought I wasn't around. Michael calling me the afterthought. Clara laughing, saying, "She's just filler." Their words cut deep, but I swallowed them. I convinced myself they were just jealous of my kindness, my perseverance, that one day it would matter. Then one evening, I overheard something I wasn't supposed to. I was walking past my parents' study when I heard their voices. My father's deep and commanding, my mother's sharper, like glass breaking. "She doesn't have the drive," my father said. "She's not like the others," my mother agreed. "She'll never carry the legacy." I froze in the hallway, my heart pounding. They weren't talking about Michael. They weren't talking about Clara. They were talking about me. For the first time, I realized that no matter what I did, no matter how loyal or devoted I was, I would never be enough. But even then, I still clung to the smallest shred of hope. Maybe they didn't understand me. Maybe they were too blind to see. Maybe when the time came, when the will was read, they would finally acknowledge me, not for my wealth, but for my love. That's what I believed. That's what I told myself. Until the letter arrived. It was a thin envelope, my name typed on the front. Inside, a single sheet of paper. Cold, formal, from the family lawyer. "You're no longer listed as a beneficiary of your parents' estate." Just like that, I was erased. No phone call, no explanation, just a piece of paper that reduced me to nothing. I called my parents again and again. No answer. I drove to the estate, pounding on the iron gates, only for the guards, men who had known me since childhood, to shake their heads. "Sorry," one muttered. "We can't let you in." I stood there in the rain, staring at the mansion I grew up in, while my siblings watched from the windows. I could see the smirk on Michael's face, the delighted wave from Clara. I felt humiliated, shattered, abandoned, and still, I tried to convince myself it wasn't real, that there was some mistake, that my parents, cold as they could be, would never cut me out completely. But days turned to weeks, weeks turned to months, silence. and the cracks I had ignored my entire life widened into gaping wounds. Everywhere I looked, reminders of their betrayal stared back at me. Clara posting pictures of new jewelry, hinting at family rewards. Michael boasting about his future as the head of the empire. My parents appearing in society pages with only their favored children at their side. And me, I was a ghost, invisible, forgotten. But here's the thing about ghosts. We linger, we watch, we remember. And sometimes we return with unfinished business. Because one night, when I thought I had reached my lowest point, I stumbled across something that would change the game. Something they never expected me to find. And what I discovered next changed everything. The first time I realized the betrayal was deeper than a letter, I was standing in line at a coffee shop. Behind me, 2 women whispered, too loud to be discreet. "Did you hear? Robert and Eleanor cut their middle child out completely." "Really? I thought families kept those things private." "Oh no," the other woman chuckled. "Michael told everyone, said she was a disappointment." I froze. My stomach turned. My brother wasn't just celebrating privately, he was making my erasure public. That night, I called him. He picked up on the second ring, his voice dripping with mockery. "Well, well, the ghost speaks." "Michael," I said, trying to steady my breath, "why are you spreading lies about me?" "Lies?" he laughed. "Oh, sweet sister. The only lie was you believing you ever mattered. They've made their choice. You're nothing. Accept it." I clenched my fist so hard my nails drew blood. "You won't get away with this," I whispered. "Get away with what?" he taunted. "Being loved, being chosen. Face it, you lost." He hung up before I could answer. I stood there in my dark apartment, phone in my hand, rage boiling through me, and then it got worse. 2 weeks later, I was invited to a charity gala. It was a small hope of normalcy, of escaping the suffocating silence. I put on my best dress, painted on a brave face, and walked in. Only to see them, my parents, my siblings, laughing at the center of the room like royalty. For a moment, I considered turning around, but I told myself, no, I belong there just as much as they did, so I approached. "Mother, father," I said, my voice soft but steady. They turned. My mother's smile faltered, then hardened. My father's eyes scanned me as if I were a stranger. "What are you doing here?" my mother hissed. "I was invited," I answered. "This is a public event." Michael leaned in, smirking. "Security must be getting sloppy." Clara giggled. "Should we have her escorted out?" The humiliation hit me like a punch. People nearby turned to look, whispers rising. "No," my father finally said. "Let her stay. Let everyone see what failure looks like." I felt the air leave my lungs. My own father had said it, publicly, coldly. The room spun. I wanted to scream, to cry, to run. Instead, I forced my feet to carry me away. I left the gala, my face burning, my heart shattered. But their cruelty wasn't finished. The next day, photos appeared online. Me walking away from this gala, shoulders hunched, mascara streaked down my face. Headlines: "Disinherited daughter crashes family event." The comments were brutal. "Attention seeker!" "No wonder they cut her out." And I knew exactly who had leaked it. Michael! I called my sister, desperate for even a shred of compassion. "Clara," I pleaded, "why are you letting him do this? Why are you laughing with him while I'm being destroyed?" Her voice was syrupy sweet, dripping with venom. "Oh, darling, don't take it personally. It's just, you've always been the extra piece. And really, isn't it better this way? No pressure, no expectations, just fade away." I hung up. My hands trembled. My heart thundered. Fade away. That's what they wanted. But the betrayal still had layers left to unfold. I lost my job next. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. I worked in a mid-sized firm, steady hours, steady pay. I had built my reputation through hard work, not my family name, until one morning, my boss called me into his office. He didn't meet my eyes. "I'm sorry," he said, "we're letting you go." "What? Why?" I demanded. He sighed. "Your family reached out. They made it clear they don't trust you with responsibilities. Clients are nervous. I can't risk it." I felt my chest tighten. "My family destroyed my career?" He lowered his voice. "They're powerful. I can't fight them. I'm sorry." I walked out of that office with my head high, but inside I was crumbling. My parents hadn't just cut me out of their will, they were cutting me out of life itself. No support, no reputation, no future, and it kept getting worse. I tried dating, hoping maybe to find love where family failed me, but even there, the betrayal followed. A man I trusted, someone I thought cared, disappeared suddenly. When I asked him why, his text came back short and brutal. Your brother warned me, said you're toxic, crazy, not worth it. I stared at the screen, my hands shaking. My family wasn't satisfied with stealing my inheritance. They were poisoning every connection I had. I became a pariah. At the grocery store, neighbors avoided me. At the gym, whispers followed me. My parents' influence stretched further than I ever imagined. They were erasing me, piece by piece, until nothing remained. And worst of all, I started to believe them. Maybe I really was nothing. Maybe I really was a disappointment. Maybe I really didn't matter. I spent nights staring at the ceiling, my mind replaying every word they had said. Failure, disappointment, fade away. The words dug into me like knives. But even as despair consumed me, a small ember of rage began to burn. Because no matter how much they tried to erase me, I knew the truth. I had been the loyal one, the dependable one, the one who cared when no one else did. And deep down, I sensed there was more to their betrayal than cruelty. Secrets, lies, something they were hiding, and if I could find it, I could destroy them. One night, broken and desperate, I returned to the estate. The guards had changed shifts. For the first time in months, the gates were open for a delivery truck. I slipped inside, my heart racing. I crept through the shadows, past the garden I once played in, past the study where I had overheard their whispers. And that's when I found it. In the old library, tucked inside a locked cabinet hidden beneath files of investments and contracts, was a folder. My name was on it. Hands trembling, I opened it. Inside were documents. Bank transfers, property deeds, hidden accounts, and a will. Not the new one. The one that erased me, but the old one. The one where I was still included. Where I was meant to inherit more than I ever imagined. They hadn't just cut me out. They had rewritten history. And at that moment, as I stared at the evidence in my hands, I realized something I never thought I'd feel again. Hope. I thought finding the old will would be enough. For a brief moment, standing in that dusty library with the folder in my hands, I felt powerful again. Vindicated. Proof that once I had mattered. But that night, reality set in. What good was a piece of paper if no one believed me? My parents had lawyers, money, influence. If I tried to fight them alone, they'd bury me under a mountain of legal jargon and lies. They would twist the story until I looked like the desperate, bitter child clinging to scraps. And the truth? That's exactly how I felt. The weight of everything pressed down on me. The humiliation, the whispers, the loneliness. My apartment was dark, cold, filled with silence that screamed louder than any insult. I had lost my family, my reputation, my career, even my dignity. I hit rock bottom the night I sat on the floor, surrounded by unpaid bills, staring at the will with tears blurring my vision. Maybe they're right, I whispered to myself. Maybe I am nothing. I don't know how long I sat there. Hours, maybe. The night stretched on endlessly. And then there was a knock at my door. I hesitated. No one visited me anymore. No friends, no family. Who could it be? Slowly, I opened the door, and there stood Margaret. Margaret had been our housekeeper for decades. She had practically raised us while my parents were busy with their empire. She was the one who bandaged my scraped knees, who sat with me when I had nightmares, who whispered, "Don't cry, sweetheart. You matter." I hadn't seen her in months. I thought she had turned her back on me like everyone else. But there she was. Her face older, tired, but her eyes full of the same warmth I remembered. "Can I come in?" she asked softly. I nodded, too stunned to speak. She stepped inside, closed the door, and for a moment we just stared at each other. Then she reached out and pulled me into a hug. That's when I broke. I sobbed into her shoulder, all the pain I had been carrying pouring out. "I'm nothing, Margaret," I choked out. "They've destroyed me. I don't even exist anymore." She pulled back, cupped my face, and shook her head. "No, child," she said firmly. "You are more than they'll ever admit, and I know things they don't want anyone to know." Her words cut through the darkness like light. "What do you mean?" I asked. She sat down at my kitchen table, folded her hands, and looked me dead in the eye. Your parents are not as untouchable as they think. I worked in that house for 30 years. I know every corner, every secret, and I've seen the lies they built their empire on. My heart pounded. Secrets? What kind of secrets? She leaned closer, lowering her voice. Your brother's company. It isn't clean. He launders money for your father. Your sister, she's been siphoning off funds into accounts inside me. Not despair, not hopelessness. Fire. Margaret, I whispered, will you help me? She reached across the table, squeezed my hand. To my last breath. And for the first time in months, I felt like I wasn't alone. The next days blurred into a strange rhythm. During the day, I went through the motions of survival, eating, paying what little I could, pretending to function. At night, Margaret and I pored over documents, piecing together the web of lies my family had spun. Every page was another dagger of truth. Bank transfers to shell companies, fake charities set up by my father, Clara's secret accounts in the Cayman Islands, Michael's inflated invoices and rigged contracts. My family wasn't just cruel, they were criminals. And I held the proof in my hands. But proof wasn't enough. I needed a stage. I needed timing. I needed to make sure when the world saw the truth, it would burn so brightly there would be no hiding it. That's when the letter arrived. From the lawyer. The official reading of the will was scheduled. I held the letter, my pulse racing. This was it. The stage I had been waiting for. The day when all eyes would be on them, when they would be basking in victory, certain they had erased me, and I would walk in, not broken, not begging, not forgotten, armed. That night, I sat in the darkness of my apartment, the folder from the library on one side, Margaret's USB on the other. My weapons, my truth. For months they had humiliated me, destroyed me, left me to rot. But the tide was turning, I whispered to myself, over and over. They wanted me invisible, but they're going to see me. They're all going to see me. And for the first time, I almost smiled. Because I knew something they didn't. They thought they had written the ending of my story. But I was only just beginning to write theirs. The day of the will reading arrived. The sun glared down like a spotlight as I walked toward the lawyer's office, briefcase in hand. My heart pounded with every step. Months of humiliation, loneliness, and betrayal had led to this moment. And now, it was my turn. I paused outside the tall glass doors. I could already hear their laughter drifting from inside. My siblings, my parents, so sure of themselves, so certain they had erased me. I took a deep breath. My hands trembled, but not from fear, from anticipation. Inside the office smelled of leather and old books. A mahogany table stretched across the room, papers neatly stacked in front of the lawyer. My father sat tall and rigid, my mother beside him, pearls glinting under the light. Michael leaned back in his chair, smirking, already victorious. Clara scrolled through her phone, her laughter sharp and cruel. The lawyer cleared his throat. Shall we begin? As the will was read, I stood outside the door listening. Every word felt like a blade cutting deeper. To my beloved son, Michael. To my cherished daughter, Clara. No mention of me, not even a footnote. And then came the silence, the finality, until I pushed the doors open. The room froze. My heels clicked against the marble floor as I walked in, head held high, briefcase clutched tight. Michael's smirk vanished. Clara's phone slipped from her hand. My mother's lips parted in shock. What are you doing here? My father barked. I ignored him. I walked straight to the table, set the briefcase down, and opened it with a deliberate click. Inside were folders, documents, evidence. This, I said, my voice steady, is the truth. The lawyer frowned. I'm sorry, but you're not. Be quiet. I cut him off. You need to hear this. They all do. I pulled out the first folder and slid it across the table to my father. Bank transfers, I said. Shell companies, fraud, all under Michael's management, and all tied directly back to you. Michael's face drained of color. That's a lie, he shouted. I turned to the lawyer. Check the account numbers. They're real. Trace them. Gas rippled through the room. My father's jaw clenched, his fists tightening on the armrests. Next, I slid another folder toward Clara. Overseas accounts, hundreds of thousands siphoned off from family charities. You thought no one would find them, but Margaret did. And now I have them. Clara's hands trembled as she flipped through the pages, her composure cracking. You can't prove this, she stammered. Oh, but I can, I whispered. Finally, I pulled out the last folder, the old will, the one with my name still on it. I held it up for everyone to see. This is what they don't want you to know. Once I was meant to inherit. Once I was part of this family, but they erased me. Not because I was unworthy, not because I was a failure, but because I was a threat. Because I don't lie, because I don't steal, because I don't play their games. My voice rose, stronger, sharper. They wanted me invisible, but today everyone sees me. The lawyer's face had gone pale. He cleared his throat. These are serious accusations. If true, there will be consequences, legal consequences. Michael slammed his fist on the table. This is nonsense. She's desperate. She's making it all up. Really? I asked. Then how do you explain the IRS agents waiting outside? I tipped them off this morning. They'll be very interested in your files. The room erupted into chaos. Clara burst into tears, begging my mother to intervene. My father roared, accusing me of betrayal, while Michael shouted that I was ruining everything. And I stood there, calm, as their empire cracked before my eyes. The lawyer finally raised his voice. Enough! If these documents are authentic, the will itself may be contested, and fraud of this scale, well, you won't be walking away today as victors. For the first time in my life, the power shifted. I wasn't the forgotten child anymore. I was the storm they never saw coming. As security and officials swarmed the office, I stepped back, letting it unfold. My siblings clung to each other, their carefully crafted images collapsing. My parents sat rigid, their pride shattered, their silence louder than any scream. Michael turned to me, his face red with fury. You'll regret this. I met his eyes. No, brother, you will. The humiliation was delicious, not violent, not cruel, just fitting. Their own lies and greed turned against them, exposed under the very spotlight they had always craved. By the time I left that office, reporters were already outside, microphones flashing. Questions flew through the air. Is it true? Did you embezzle? Did you commit fraud? Cameras caught every tear on Clara's face, every furious glare from Michael, every strained smile from my mother as she tried to hold herself together. And me? I walked through the chaos, the briefcase at my side, my head held high. For the first time, I wasn't invisible. The fallout came fast. Michael's company crumbled within weeks. Investors pulled out, lawsuits piled up. His name, once golden, was dragged through headlines dripping with scandal. Clara was forced to return her stolen wealth. Her friends vanished. Invitations stopped coming. The darling of society became its disgrace. And my parents, the mighty Robert and Eleanor, they were forced into silence. Their empire shaken, their legacy stained, their perfect image shattered beyond repair. And all I had done was reveal the truth. It was poetic. They cut me out because I was too honest. And in the end, it was honesty that destroyed them. The irony was almost sweet. One night, weeks later, I stood outside the mansion gates. The house loomed dark, silent. Reporters still lingered at the edges, hoping for scraps of gossip. Inside, I knew my parents were huddled together, furious and broken. My siblings, isolated. The family that once flaunted its power reduced to whispers and shadows. I should have felt pity, but I didn't. I felt free. As I turned to leave, my phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. We need to talk, please. We were wrong. It was from my mother. I stared at the screen, my heart strangely calm. For years, I had begged for their attention, their love, their approval. Now, they begged for mine. I put the phone back in my pocket. Let them wait. The revenge wasn't in destroying them. The revenge was in watching them live with the ruins they had built themselves. The weeks after the reading of the will felt surreal. For so long, I had lived in the shadow of my family, ignored, dismissed, silenced. But now, everywhere I went, people looked at me differently. Not as the forgotten daughter, not as the one erased, but as the one who dared to stand up. It wasn't about wealth. It wasn't about money. It was about finally being seen. Reporters called me brave. Strangers stopped me in the street, whispering words of encouragement. Even old acquaintances, people who once brushed me aside, now came forward saying they admired me. At first, it felt strange, almost uncomfortable, but slowly I realized this was respect, real respect. The kind my family never gave me. I rented a small apartment downtown overlooking the city lights. For the first time, I decorated a space with things that were mine. Not heirlooms, not gifts laced with obligation. Just me, plants by the window, stacks of books, a framed photograph of Margaret and me, smiling under the autumn sun. I wasn't rich, but I was free. Sometimes I'd hear the echoes of my family's downfall in the news. Michael's face plastered on headlines about fraud. Clara photographed storming out of court, sunglasses hiding her tears. My father's once respected name dragged into hearings, my mother's charities under investigation. Each time, I felt the same quiet satisfaction. Not because they were ruined, but because I wasn't. I survived what they tried to do to me, and I came out stronger. One evening, as I sipped tea by my window, my phone rang. An unfamiliar number flashed on the screen. For a moment, I considered ignoring it, but something inside told me to answer. "Hello?" I said. There was silence, then a voice, fragile, shaken. "Sweetheart, it's me, my mother." For a moment, I couldn't breathe. I hadn't heard her voice in months, not since that day. "We need to talk," she said. "Please, we were wrong about everything." I closed my eyes. I could picture her. Pearls gone, voice trembling, no longer the woman who sat on her throne of judgment, just a mother, broken. But I wasn't that desperate little girl anymore, begging for scraps of her love. "I don't think we have anything left to say," I whispered, her voice cracked. "Please, your father isn't well. Michael is gone. Clara won't speak to me. I need you." A lump formed in my throat. For a flicker of a second, the child inside me wanted to run to her, to forgive, to forget, to finally hear the words I had longed for all my life. But then I remembered the years of silence, the cruel looks, the way they had erased me without hesitation. And I remembered Margaret's voice. "Your worth isn't in their approval. It's in the life you choose for yourself." "I'm sorry," I said softly, "but I can't be what you need anymore." Before she could answer, I hung up, and I didn't cry. I felt free. After that day, the calls kept coming. Numbers I didn't recognize, messages left on voicemail, pleas for forgiveness, promises to make things right, but I never answered. I had already chosen my peace. Months later, I stood in front of a lecture hall speaking to young women about resilience, about how to stand tall even when the world tried to make you small. The applause at the end thundered in my ears, not because of fame, but because I knew my voice mattered. My story mattered. I wasn't invisible anymore, and the best revenge wasn't in their downfall. It was in the life I built without them. As I walked out of the hall that night, the cool air brushing my skin, I felt lighter than I ever had before. The past was behind me. The scars would always remain, but they were proof that I had survived, and that survival was its own victory. I thought back to that little girl, standing in the corner, desperate for her parents to notice her. I wanted to tell her. One day, they'll notice. One day, you'll walk into a room and silence it. And one day, they'll regret ever underestimating you. And that day had already come, because now my parents called me every week, and I never answered.